Well, we're going to continue where we were with looking at all of the aspects of an image that assists us in creating an amazing image, one that has a narrative, one that the aesthetics are pleasant. And each of the things that we've talked about, like including shapes and lines and textures, rhythm and patterns and repetition are part of that, of just these little elements in an image, apart from the subject, that, or maybe sometimes they are the subject, that really resonate with the viewer. And by resonating, it captures their attention and keeps them in the image. And at the end of the day, we've talked about what makes an intriguing image. And intriguing is when the viewer actually stays within the image. And so the next area that we're going to move on to is looking at rhythm and movement in an image. And today we're looking at rhythm, and rhythm in terms of patterns, mimicry, and repetition, and how those things engage the viewer. As human beings, we instinctively look at patterns, or look for patterns, in almost every aspect of our learning. And it's just an instinctive thing that we do. It helps us understand the world so much better if we can see a pattern in it. And so when we look at an image, we get reassured when there's a pattern in there, because it helps us understand the image a lot better. And so it just helps with the narrative of an image if there is some form of repetition or pattern. And we'll have a look at how that repetition and patterns may not actually be a physical thing. It can be also a cognitive pattern. And the pattern can be the subject of the image, as the previous one, where I had those prayer tablets, I guess they are, I'm not sure, are the subject of the image, and they're repeated and they are in a pattern. But it also may be the background of the image, and that then supports the narrative of the image. So it need not necessarily be the subject. Patterns can come in all shapes and sizes, and we're going to have a look at each of the different types. And what I want to encourage you to do is to think about, when you are looking at a scene, to see if you can see there's patterns in it, and how you can utilize those patterns as either part of the subject or as part of the background. And patterns are created either by nature. We often see patterns in nature, particularly in flowers and tree bark and things like that. But they can also be created by man. And this is typically when we take architectural photography, we'll try and enhance the patterns that the architect has created within a building. But as photographers, we can also create patterns as well, just by putting our own technical knowledge, either whilst we're taking the photograph or when we're editing the photograph. So we'll have a look at all sorts of different ways that we can actually incorporate patterns within our images. So looking at the different types of patterns, we can have abstract patterns, and these can be created by nature. The one on the right, I was boiling some toffee last week, and I just loved the patterns that the boiling sugar had. So, of course, I had to go and grab the camera and take it. We typically think of patterns as being geometric, and that's what when we photograph those wonderful abstracts of architecture, we tend to highlight the geometric shapes within the buildings. The one on the right there is one that is actually a combination of two photographs that I took when we were in our CBD walk. And one was of a garage door, which had lovely geometric patterns in it. And the other one was of the law library, and numerous other ones. And I was inspired by quilting and seeing an exhibition on quilting to do a photograph like that. So we can sometimes, as photographers, when we are trying to collate or combine our images into something that's more artistic, use the concept of patterns to do that. I love using a long lens and just taking sections of buildings. And the one on the right there was the university we went to, not in our last visit, but the one before. And I just loved how the architect had those rhythms going with the curves. What we've looked at today tends to be more regular and geometric. Organic patterns also occur, and we often see these organic patterns. Graphic artists will use them in design and in fabrics, but we can also see them in nature, where they're not necessarily regular and they're just made up by irregular things, but they do in fact provide a pattern. We can also have predictable regular patterns and irregular patterns. The one on the right there was it reminded me of a stained glass window. It was a cypress trunk and it was wet and it just glowed in a dark forest. It was just amazing, but it was the patterns that attracted me. And so rather than take a photo of the tree, I just took a photo of the bark. We can see irregular patterns. The one on the left there, I took at Alwyn Gardens last week. It was just one of their ponds that had pondweed in it. And I just thought it was beautiful. It looks like something that someone's painted. And the one on the right was one that I took down at Brighton Beach on one of our excursions, which I just used intentional camera movement to really accentuate the patterns that the masts were making. So we can see patterns everywhere. We just have to try and work out how we can capture them to get them to assist in the aesthetics and the narrative of an image. So a lot of those patterns, some of them are repeated, some of them aren't. The organic ones and the abstract ones aren't repeated, but the repetition adds a rhythm to an image. And just like humans seek out patterns to help them learn and understand the world better, we also seek out rhythm, and we'll seek out rhythm in music, and we also seek out visual rhythm. And visual rhythm gives us it's like a heartbeat. It gives us a feeling of comfortable with an image. And so that then tugs on our emotional side and the narrative that an image provides us. So it'll often reinforce an idea and help us understand a hierarchy within an image. Because when we talked about finding visual paths through images, we realized that images do have a hierarchy of where we look at different objects and how we interpret that of where the image is actually taking us. So we're now going to have a look at how we can get repeated elements. And those repeated elements can be in the subject, in the background, but we can also have repeated elements that give us a feeling of rhythm and repetition in terms of colours and shapes and tones and just ideas within images. And that just adds another layer of aesthetic and a layer of narrative to keep us engaged with the image. So within an image, we can just have repeating subjects, and that just gives us a rhythm of allowing us to go through like a heartbeat through each of these different areas of the image. We can have repeating subjects, and we talked about if we are doing repeating subjects to try and keep those numbers of 2, 1, 2, 3, 5. That number of subjects usually makes a more interesting image. More interesting than the one on the right there where we've got those huts. It would have been better if there'd been 3 of them or 5 of them, but you get what you get. The other thing is, when we're talking about repeating subjects, is mimicry, trying to it's another intriguing aspect within an image. If we can have two things within the image that mimic each other, and it may be two objects, or it may be just two abstract elements like the image on the right. But mimicry is, again, a repeating a subject, and it may be repeating it several times or just twice, but it does add intrigue to an image. And it may not only be the subjects that we repeat, we can repeat the background elements as well. And for the background elements, it often leads us into the image, and we see that as a technique when we talked about leading lines, of having columns leading us into an image and something in the background, ideally, when we do that. So they're just repeating backgrounds. Now, the repeating colours is in an image where colour is actually part of the aesthetic and part of the narrative. It's good to have a rhythm through the image of that repeated colour. And in the one on the left here, we've got both the mimicry of the two trains, but we've also got the repetition and that rhythm between the columns in the building, the yellow columns in the building at the top left, and the trams. And we go backwards and forwards between them, and we have repeating in the columns as well. So that just gives this image an extra pop by having those repeating elements within it. The one on the right is the colours, and the repeating colours and the mimicry give us an extra dimension to the image beyond just a tram passing a building. And also, you know, there's repeating aspects within the buildings, repeating colours with the and rhythm with the tram and the red part of the building, and also within the barrier, the orange barrier in the building. So we bounce between each one of those colours in a sort of rhythm, and it just holds us within that image so much longer. We can also have repeating shapes within an image, and this one on the right was one that I took when we were at ScienceWorks in the sewage station. And the repeating elements here are the circles. So if you see something like this and you think, well, that's a really interesting old pump handle, how can I optimize this image to make it a lot more interesting? And this is where I recommend that you walk around it, that take a step to the left, take a step to the right, open up your zoom, you know, try it as a portrait, try it as a landscape, and see if you can incorporate any of the other elements that we've talked about. And in this case, we've got textures, we've got shapes, and we've got repeated shapes within it. And the same with the staircase on the left, which I took at Federation Square on one of our workshops, where we had this repeated element of the stairs. We've got the rectangular shapes that are repeated in numerous different ways within the Federation Square building. And then we've got the vertical repetition of the columns going up. So all of those things add rhythm to the images, and that rhythm resonates with our heartbeat of this makes us feel comfortable. So rhythm builds anticipation, and its predictability provides assurance. It can be regular, and we can have a regular beat, or we can have a random beat. We can have alternating beats, flowing beats, and progressive beats. So we'll just have a look at some of the different ways that when we incorporate repeating elements within our image, how we can optimize that rhythm. And we typically think of rhythm as being regular, a regular beat. And this is what our heartbeat is. And so we'll frequently capture images ourselves and see images that we like that have this regular rhythm going through them. We also sometimes have the concept of a random rhythm, and the one on the left here is another one I took at one of the ponds in Alwyn Gardens. and it has got repeated objects, but they're certainly random. But we do bounce between them. And the one on the right, the same repeated elements of the vertical elements of the lavender, we bounce between those. We can have alternating rhythms, and when I went looking through my images, don't obviously do this one a lot, but the one on the left there was an image I created during COVID about celebrating at home by yourself, because during our massive lockdown, that was all that we could do. And I've got the alternating rhythms of they're all me, the two people in the middle and the two people on the outside, and we bounce between those. And the one on the right is just a collage of an image that I did at Melbourne Market. And again, it's just alternating rhythms of different repeated items. We can have flowing rhythms, and the one on the left here, we've got circular flowing rhythms. The one on the right is just some sand patterns that I took when I was in Tasmania last month. And the shapes and the rhythm of the patterns, the wave patterns in the sand, take us around that image and help our visual path through the image. Progressive rhythms are when we take repeating objects, but we use perspective to give us a visual depth. And in these, the size of the repeated objects closer to the lens are much larger than the repeated objects further away. But the rhythm is there of you bounce from one element to another within each one of these images, and that's what gives them the strength. This was one that I took when we were photographing at Fed Square as well, and I just love the rhythm in the patterns of the oars. As they had hit the water, you could see the history, and that then provides us with a visual path through the image. So put all of these things in your visual image vocabulary that's at the back of your mind. So whenever we go to one of our workshops, think about, I've seen an image before that I really liked, and I could see the oar patterns in the water. I wonder if I'll be able to capture those. And that may be means walking to get the light to hit them. It means you frame it up a different way. However, but you've got an idea in your head of how can you take this lovely reflection and this oarsman and make it into an image that's more interesting than just a photo of a rower on the river. So I want you to think about patterns and repetitions in your images, and in the images that you've taken to date, and in images when you're reading magazines, to see how they've incorporated those patterns. And that repetition may not just be of the subject. It may be in the background, and it also may be in colours or shapes. And shapes is a frequent one where you'll see lots of circles. It may be circles of people within a circular background and there may be circles even within that. It may be just the lights in the background may be in circles. So that repetition actually really strengthens an image. So whenever you're looking at a scene, try and think, is there any repetition here? Are there any patterns? How can I incorporate them within my image to give the viewers a reason to continue to stay within my image? So these repetition and patterns and rhythms are just one more tool in your box of how to create good compositions. And we've talked a lot about textures and lines and shapes and leading lines, layering images. All of these tools are now in your toolbox. So when you are taking images, I want you to consciously think about it. And when you're showing me your images, if you can share with me, oh, Pam, when I took this, I remembered about incorporating this, and this is what I've done. and we can have a look at how you're actually remembering to incorporate these. So until next time, thank you.